Andy Griffith may have been the star of The Andy Griffith Show, but he wasn't the audience's favorite character. Many lovable and comedic characters populated Mayberry, and one of the most popular was Floyd Lawson, or Floyd the Barber. Sadly, Howard McNear, who played Floyd the Barber, suffered 2 separate strokes over the course of its 8-season run, resulting in his 1969 death. Join Facts First as we take a look at how Howard McNear suffered 2 strokes during The Andy Griffith Show. Floyd the Barber was one of Mayberry's best residents. The Andy Griffith Show premiered to American audiences in 1960, and it quickly became a fan favorite. The show focused on the character of Andy Taylor, played by Andy Griffith. Andy was the sheriff of the show's setting of Mayberry, and also the widowed father of Opie, played by Ron Howard. While Andy and Opie were certainly the main characters, they were often overshadowed for audiences by Mayberry's other residents. One of the show's most popular characters quickly became Floyd Lawson, or Floyd the Barber. Veteran TV actor Howard McNear played him. Howard McNear brought Floyd to life. Prior to being cast, Howard had been through a long and storied career on both radio and television. Sadly, his work on The Andy Griffith Show was his last, as the actor tragically passed away during filming. Thankfully, Howard appeared in plenty of the show's 249 episodes, 80 to be exact, with his final episode being the show's 219th. Howard McNear's departure from the show was caused by his worsening condition after a debilitating stroke he'd suffered several years earlier and had left half of his body paralyzed, resulting in him being absent for over a year of filming. During this chunk of time, Howard was absent for 40 of the show's episodes. Surprisingly, he returned to the show for a significant chunk following his original stroke. He did so both because he wanted to get back to work and because Andy Griffith himself was desperate for the actor's return. According to Andy, there was a major dearth of comedy on the series in the wake of Howard's absence. Although Howard wasn't the focal point of the show, he brought a comedic element to the series that couldn't be replaced. Howard McNear suffered a stroke during filming. Howard had been brought on to The Andy Griffith Show in 1961, while the show was still in its first season. Forgetting the period where Howard was out of commission as a result of his first stroke, the star then continued reprising Floyd the Barber until 1967. His first stroke occurred in 1963, and it left the entire left side of the actor's body paralyzed. He took a break for nearly 2 years before making his return. However, upon Howard's return, the crew of The Andy Griffith Show had to work around the fact that the actor could only use the right side of his body. Instead of writing Howard's stroke into the series, the crew simply filmed him from the side. Both Andy Griffith Show's fans and creative staff seemed pleased with the results, and the actor subsequently continued reprising the role of Floyd the Barber on the series until around the time of his death several years later. Prior to Howard's return, Andy and the show's creative team had tried out different ways to make the show work without him. There was even one episode where a stand-in was used for the character when Opie gets a haircut. The show couldn't work without Floyd. While Andy Griffith tried to make The Andy Griffith Show work without Floyd the Barber, he claimed the show lacked comedy without the character. Thankfully, he was able to get Howard to return, but not for long. Howard's condition continued to worsen after returning to the show, and it got to the point where he couldn't perform. Shortly after, he suffered the fatal stroke that caused him to pass away. Before we tell you more about Howard, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Howard continued performing while paralyzed. Many were surprised when Andy Griffith brought Howard McNear back. However, Andy simply felt Howard was an integral part of the show, so it was worth filming around the actor's paralysis. Howard's longtime wife had agreed it would probably be good for the actor to get out and start working again, so Howard was brought back on. Floyd the Barber returns. Howard's return to the show came in 1965, but he sadly passed away 2 years later. His final appearance came shortly before his passing, and it was apparently tragic for his co-stars on the series to watch as the actor slowly lost his ability to function. Upon first returning, Andy claimed Howard's mind remained sharp despite the fact he could only use half of his body. And although Howard was only able to use his right hand, he was still able to make the classic comic gestures that audiences grew to love him for. Jack Dodson also shared he had difficulty watching as Howard McNear's condition worsened. Jack played Howard Sprague. While Howard McNear was mentally sharp upon his initial return, his state deteriorated over the following years. Jack Dodson claims it was heartbreaking to witness Howard film the scene that ended up being his last. Apparently, Howard had a very hard time remembering his lines, and he grew quite frustrated. It became obvious he couldn't keep going. Howard's final appearance. Following the last scene Howard filmed, he left the set of The Andy Griffith Show and never came back. Of course, he wound up suffering his fatal stroke shortly afterwards. Howard's last episode was Goober's Contest, the 219th episode. In the episode, Goober and Wally organize a sweepstake competition to draw business to their filling station. Floyd the Barber ends up winning the contest, and he gets a much larger cash prize than Goober and Wally were intending due to the two accidentally telling the person in charge of filling the envelopes the wrong amount. The actor started out on radio. Howard's biggest success in radio was on the series Gunsmoke, in which Howard was the first actor to ever portray the character of Doc Charles Adam. That actor wound up being portrayed by William Conrad by the time Gunsmoke was brought over to TV. Howard broke out into television in the early 50s. He appeared in many different shows before getting his gig as Floyd the Barber. He even appeared on Gunsmoke for a few episodes, though not in the role of Doc. He could also be seen in TV series like The George Burns and Gracie Allen Show, The Real McCoys, and I Love Lucy. He even featured in 7 episodes of the Jack Benny program. Howard's personal life. Howard married his first and only wife, Helen Spatz, in 1926. The two remained married until Howard's death. Following his death, the majority of the actor's former co-workers from The Andy Griffith Show attended his funeral. Despite the fact that he was sorely missed, the Andy Griffith Show producer Richard Linke later recalled the funeral had been an oddly joyous one. According to him, there was more laughter at Howard McNear's funeral than any he'd ever been to. Now it's time to hear from you. Did you know that Howard McNear suffered 2 separate strokes while filming The Andy Griffith Show? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.